Peter Dutton, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thanks, Andrew.
Well, let's begin with the visit of Premier Lee. You've been calling on the government to muscle up to China. You're due to meet him on Monday afternoon. Tony Abbott once famously remarked he was going to shirt front Vladimir Putin. Will that be your approach to the meeting?
Short answer is no. I had a great meeting with the Foreign Minister Wang Yi only a few months ago in Canberra, and we obviously have met with the Chinese ambassador and with other visiting Chinese officials as well. So we'll have that meeting scheduled tomorrow, and very happy to meet with Premier Lee. And it's important that he's visiting obviously South Australia and Western Australia as well, getting a better feel of the country, and no doubt visiting the resources sector in WA, which will be an important part of that visit.
The PM's made clear he's going to raise these difficult issues with the Chinese Premier around the incidents with the Australian Navy, the case of Yang Hengjun. Will you be raising these issues as well, and will you raise issues around cyber attacks and foreign interference?
Well, Andrew, as we would with any partner, and China's an incredibly important trading partner, I'd love to see the trading relationship increase twofold. I'd love to see there being a liberation of some of the trading arrangements, and I think that's to the mutual benefit of both China and Australia as well. But equally, as I say, with any partner where we have difficulties or in an honest, open relationship, it's important to raise not just the opportunities, but the grievances or the concerns that we have. We would do it with New Zealand, we do it with the United States, and we would do it with China as well. And that's certainly been the approach in the past, and it's an approach that will continue into the future.
Will you raise Taiwan with the Chinese Premier?
Well, we'll raise a number of issues, and I'm going to meet with the Chinese Premier along with Simon Birmingham and Kevin Hogan, our Foreign Affairs Minister and Trade Ministers respectively, and we'll raise those issues that are important. And there are other military issues. It's obviously a broad and complex relationship. The focus will be on how we can increase our trading arrangements. But as I say, to be good friends, you need to have an honest relationship where there are concerns, and there'll be concerns that the Chinese have that they'll want to raise with us as well. And that's as these relationships will continue. I was a minister heavily engaged with the Obama administration, with the Trump administration, with the Biden administration, and from time to time there are grievances as well as points of clarification, as well as points of heated agreement. That's the nature, obviously, of these relationships.
How do you view this visit as opposed to, say, President Xi visiting? What's the difference?
Well, the difference, obviously, is that the Premier is our Prime Minister's counterpart, so there'll be an opportunity for Anthony Albanese to strengthen that relationship, and we certainly support it. As I say, there are many economic interests at stake here, and we have to make sure that we've got security around supply chains, essential medicines. We need to make sure that we've got security around elements that are essential for our industry to continue to operate. We need to make sure that there are new markets that are opening up for us, either with China or many other countries, and we can grow the economy out of that. And I think what's obvious to most Australians at the moment is that over 3 budgets, the government's really made very tough decisions for families. It's obviously politically suited the government, but they've really driven the economy into a pretty dire position at the moment. And I want to make sure that we can grow our economy, expand it so that we can create jobs and economic opportunity, taxes, royalties for the rest of the community. We just don't operate without a strong economy, and that's why families are really hurting under Labor at the moment.
I wanted to move on now to this issue of the 2030 climate change target. Do you expressly oppose this target of the government's to reduce emissions by 43% from 1990 levels by 2030? Or is it that it's just your view the government won't reach the target, so there's no point committing to it?
Well, I've made the point, Andrew, that there's no prospect, it seems, of the government reaching the target. They introduced a bill, which is now a law, to increase the price of cars by about $10,000 to help them achieve the 43% target. They're still not going to get there anyway. The 43% target has contributed significantly to an increase in power prices. And I think that the question is, what's in our country's best interest? I know the Prime Minister loves to hang out with all the world leaders and get a slap on the back and the rest of it, but his job is actually to make it easier, not harder for Australian families and small businesses. So we're fully committed to net zero by 2050. I think interim targets are fine where they're realistic, and we support renewable going into the system. We know that there's 90% firming or 24/7 power coming out of the system by 2034. The Prime Minister talks about green hydrogen replacing that. It's not commercially viable yet, and there are a lot of question marks over whether it can be, particularly given how much water is consumed to make each kilo. So we have to make sure that we've got a realistic system, and energy is the economy. It's not just your household power bill that's going through the roof. It's the local butcher and the local IGA, the local coal store, the local farmer, anybody that's got cold storage. And that's why under Labor you're paying so much more for your groceries when you go to the supermarket. So we have to get a system that's working right for us. And the Prime Minister's about to sign up to a 2035 target, only, essentially a decade away. And that's going to be between 65 and 75%. We don't even see any economic modelling yet. So what will that mean for extra increases in power prices? And a renewables-only approach that the government's adopted is going to continue to drive up power prices. Their plan is $1.2 to $1.5 trillion, all of which is going to be paid for by consumers and small business people.
Were you to hit government, would you seek to change the legislation around the 2030 target?
Well, I would act in our country's best interests, Andrew. We've got international obligations. We don't propose to leave the Paris Agreement at all, and we're fully signed up to net zero by 2050. But if you think it's a linear progression, they will cripple the economy. At the moment, Labor is slowly grinding the economy to a halt. There was 0.1% of growth in the last quarter. We know that we're up to 5 quarters now consecutively of negative growth on a per capita basis. And families know it. You speak to retailers around the country, to cafe owners and restaurateurs, they see it. They are down, in double digits in terms of their turnover. People are coming into restaurants and not ordering as much, or they're just eating at home. There is a chance that we go into recession, which is why I think there is talk of an early election. The Prime Minister will want to go before that. We know that we've had 12 interest rate increases, and we've had a threefold increase in the number of manufacturing businesses which have closed over the last 2 years under this government. So over 3 budgets, they've made decisions which have made it much tougher for families. Small businesses are closing at record numbers. And I think this is a government that, through its energy policy, the renewables-only policy, not taking into account gas and nuclear and making sure that we can have a good balance, that they really are wrecking the economy at the moment.
But Mr Dutton, just again, if you came into government, would you seek to change the legislation around the 2030 target, to change that target?
Well, Andrew, I think it would be responsible to take advice from Treasury and Finance and the central agencies about the economic conditions that we inherited from Labor. We know that debt will be over $1 trillion that will be bequeathed to the next government from Labor. We know that there's a prospect of negative growth, and we're likely going into the 6th consecutive quarter of per capita, people going backwards in their own budgets. That's what that means. So I think we have a look at all of that information, and if there are settings that we need to change, then we would change them if it means helping families with the cost of living crisis that Labor has created. But it doesn't mean exiting Paris, and it doesn't mean walking away from our very clear commitment to net zero by 2050. We're decarbonising, our economy is transitioning, and I believe that with a zero emissions nuclear technology underpinning gas, gas is going to be required like we've never seen before as we see the 90% of those firming powers going out of the system by 2034. And we're going to see the need for a replacement. And green hydrogen, the Prime Minister can't tell you when that's going to come into the system, and otherwise the lights go out, which is what the regulator's warning at the moment. Under this government, there's likely to be blackouts and brownouts. Will
you come up with the 2035 target by the time of the election? You've just mentioned the government are going to come up with one. Will you come up with an alternative as an opposition?
If the government releases the economic modelling, which shows how negatively this will impact on the economy, then we will be able to consider that and have an informed judgment. I think, well, why not sign up to 90% or 95 or 55 or 45 or 78? What do these numbers mean without understanding the impact on people's household budgets? People are struggling at the moment. They're losing their jobs. People are not able to afford their mortgages. The electricity prices under this government have gone up by 30%. Gas is up. Groceries are up. Your insurance premiums are up. The whole economy depends on energy. Whenever you've got an increase in the cost for farming through extra cost for cold storage, the farmers pass that on through higher prices that you ultimately pay at the checkout. And if the Prime Minister doesn't get this and he doesn't understand that people are hurting at the moment, I just don't know what do people have to do? Marching in the streets to tell him the reality of their lives at the moment. So let's look at the economic modelling and understand the impact, good, bad or otherwise, on our nation and make an informed judgment. Otherwise, I think it would be reckless, frankly, to sign up to a target sight unseen and not understanding whether it's going to mean another 30% increase in people's power prices. There are pensioners this winter who are eating or heating, but not both. And I'm not going to contribute to further agony for Australians that the Prime Minister is imposing on them at the moment. And that'll be a big difference between the two parties as we go into the next election.